Chapter 6. Mates and Subordinates. Mates included in the crew: removal, succession, logbook, wages, sickness, punishment, subordinates, pilots. In all the statutes which entitle the crew or the seaman of a vessel to certain privileges as against the master or owner, these words crew and seaman are construed to include the mates, as for instance the statute requiring a certain amount of provisions to be on board, the statute requiring a medicine chest, and that which punishes the master for illegal and cruel treatment of any of the crew. In all these cases the mates are entitled to the same privileges and protection with the seamen. 1 Sumner 151. 3 Sumner 209. 4 Mason 104. The chief mate is usually put on board by the owner, and is a person who is looked to for extraordinary services and responsibility. Accordingly, he cannot be removed by the master, unless for repeated and aggravated misconduct, or for palpable incapacity. 1 Pet Ad 244. 4 Wash 338. He acts in the stead of the master in case the latter dies, and whenever he is absent. 4 Mason 541. 1 Sumner 151. He is then entrusted with the care of the ship and the government of the crew. If he is appointed to act as mate by the master during the voyage, he holds his office at the master's pleasure. Gilpin 83. But if he originally shipped in that capacity, he cannot be removed without proof of gross and flagrant misconduct, or of evident unfitness, nor will 1 or 2 single instances of intemperance, disobedience, or negligence be sufficient. The misconduct must be repeated, and the habit apparently incorrigible. 1 Pet Ad 244. 4 Wash 338. Onward! The second mate and other inferior officers do not stand upon so firm a footing as the chief mate, yet they cannot be removed by the master unless for gross and repeated acts of disobedience, intemperance, dishonesty, or negligence, or for palpable incapacity. In case of the death or absence of the master, the chief mate becomes master by operation of law, but the second mate does not necessarily become chief mate. It lies with the new master to appoint whom he pleases to act as chief mate, though in most cases it should be the second mate, unless good reason exists for the contrary course. The second mate cannot, however, be degraded by the new master for any other cause than would have justified the former in so doing. Logbook. It is the duty of the chief mate to keep the logbook of the ship. This should be neatly and carefully kept, and all interlineations and erasures should be avoided, as they always raise suspicion. The entries should be made as soon as possible after each event takes place, and nothing should be entered which the mate would not be willing to adhere to in a court of justice. See page 153. In Chapter 3 of the third part, under the title Master's Relation to Officers, page 213, will be found a discussion of the question whether the master can compel an officer to do duty before the mast. In Chapters 8, 10, 11, and 12 of Part 3, under the titles Revolt, Forfeiture, Desertion, etc., will be found the laws upon those subjects relating to seamen, and it may be generally remarked that all those laws apply as well to the officers as to the foremast men. An officer forfeits his wages by desertion, and is criminally liable for mutiny, revolt, etc., like a common seaman. As to the questions what constitutes a revolt, mutiny, etc., and when absence or leaving a vessel is excusable, and when it works a forfeiture, and as to when wages are due, I would refer the reader to those titles in Chapters 8, 10, 11, and 12 of Part 3 above referred to. Wages. The chief mate in England. The observations as to the chief mate and other officers would seem to apply to such officers of British vessels. Wages. Officers may sue in admiralty for their wages, and may arrest the ship, into whosever hands it may have passed. 1 Pet Ad. 246. Which is not the case with the master, who is supposed to look solely to the personal responsibility of the owners. Wages in England. If the hiring be on the usual terms, and made by word or by writing only, and not by deed, the seamen, or any one or more of them, and every officer, except the master, may sue in the Court of Admiralty, and may, by the process of that court, arrest the ship as a security for their demand, or cite the master or owners, personally, to answer them. Abbott on Shipping, 6th edition, 588. 1 Edward, 1 EDW, 235. If the wages do not exceed £20, they may be received in a summary way under the Act 5 and 6, William IV, Chapter 19, as hereafter stated. See Cap 12. Sickness. The right of an officer to be cured at the ship's expense is the same as that of a seaman. 1 Sumner, 151. The law upon that subject will be found in Chapter 9, title Sickness, page 240. Punishment. The laws of the United States provide that if any master or officer shall unjustifiably beat, wound, or imprison any of the crew, or withhold from them suitable food and nourishment, or inflict upon them any cruel or unusual punishment, he shall be imprisoned not exceeding 5 years, and fined not exceeding $1,000 for each offense. Act 1835, Chapter 313, Section 3. The officers, as part of the crew, are entitled to the protection of this statute against the master's acts, and, on the other hand, they are liable under it for any abuse of a seaman. 4 Mason, 104. 3 Sumner, 209. The law as to the officer's right to punish a seaman has been clearly settled, and is very simple. The sole authority to punish for correction and discipline resides with the master. 2 Sumner, 584. An officer has no right to use force with a seaman, either by chastising or confining him, except in a single class of cases, that is, upon an emergency which admits of no delay, and where the use of force is necessary for the safety of life and property. If a seaman is about to do an act which may endanger life or property, and instant action is required, the officer may confine him, or use force necessary to prevent him. So if the immediate execution of an order is important, and a seaman, by obstinacy or willful negligence, prevents or impedes the act, the officer may use force necessary to secure the performance of the duty. In these cases there must be a pressing necessity which will not admit of delay, for if delay is practicable, the officer must report to the master, and leave the duty of correction with him. A mate can in no case punish a seaman for the general purposes of correction and discipline, and still less for personal disrespect to himself. 2 Sumner, 584. If the master is not on board and cannot be called upon, the authority of the officer is somewhat enlarged, but even in this case, so far as a delay is practicable, he must leave the seaman to be dealt with by the master when he returns. Except in the cases and in the manner before mentioned, the officer is liable as a trespasser for any force used with a seaman. If the officer acts under the authority, express or implied, of the master, he will not be held liable, even though the punishment should be excessive and unjustifiable, for he is, in such cases, only the agent of the master, who is responsible for the act. Where 219. Yet if the punishment be so excessive as to show malice or wantonness on the part of the officer, or there be anything in his conduct to imply the same, he will be liable in some measure himself. Subordinates. There are a number of men, usually, in merchant vessels, who are in not any respect officers, but who differ from the common seamen in that they ship in particular capacities, and to perform certain duties. These are the carpenter, steward, cook, etc. Such persons are not to be degraded for slight causes, though the master unquestionably has the power to do so upon sufficient grounds. 4 Mason, 84, where 109. He may also require them to do duty, if necessary, before the mast. He may require them to take the place of persons who have been obliged to do their work. where 109. But he cannot exact from them the duty of able seamen, unless they are such in fact. Repeated acts of disobedience, intemperance, and gross negligence, and evident incapacity for the duties undertaken, are justifying causes of removal, where 109. In all other respects, this class of persons stands upon the same footing with common seamen. They have the same privileges, and are under the same obligations and penalties. 2 Pet Ad 268. Pilots. When a pilot, who is regularly appointed, is on board, he has the absolute control of the navigation of the vessel. 1 John's 305. He is master for the time being, and is alone answerable for any damage occasioned by his own negligence or default. 1 Pet Ad 223. A pilot may sue an admiralty for his wages. 1 Mason 508. A pilot cannot claim salvage for any acts done within the limits of his duty, however useful and meritorious they may have been. Gilpin 60, 10 Peters R. 108. If towing is necessary, pilots are bound to perform it, having a claim for compensation for damages done to their boats, or for extra labor. 2 Hag 176. If extraordinary pilot service is performed, additional pilotage is the proper reward, and not salvage. 2 Hag 176. If, however, the acts done by the pilot are clearly without and beyond his duty as pilot, he may claim salvage. 1 Rob 106, Gilpin 60. Pilots in England. See the Act 6 George IV, Chapter 125, as to pilots and the rates and recovery of pilotage.